Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Spartan Nation Radio. It's now time for the state of Michigan State football, and for that segment, each and every week, we bring in Spartan Nation senior writer, the one and only, the great John Schopp. We love John. He's been part of this. John, how long have you been part of Spartan Nation? Doesn't it go back to like 2005 or 6?
I think 2009 is the summer of 2009. Started doing conference calls. The sport has changed a bit since then. The evaluation has changed, not too much since then, but yeah, 2009. So the great bulk of the D'Antonio era, and now we're obviously turning the page to the new era, the Coach Tucker era. So this, I think, will be season 12 we're getting going with. And right now, the state of Michigan State football, I think, is a little bit humbled after what happened in the draft.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in detail, John. Matter of fact, let's just get into it right now, and then I want to officially move away from the Mark D'Antonio era and be done, and just talk Mel Tucker from now on. But
Yep.
John, you've been around me a long time. You know that I have very good contacts in the NFL, and I had some pretty frank on Sunday discussions with some NFL people, and I want to basically relay them to you. And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse on D'Antonio. He's a good man. His coaches were good men. This isn't statements about their character, but it's just how bad the football program had gotten. And one of the NFL guys said to me, the best coaches know what their players can do, and they never ask them to do anything else. He said, if you watch Belichick, if you watch John Harbaugh at Baltimore, Sean Payton, he goes, when you look at some of the best coaches in college or pro football, Nick Saban, he said they know what their players can do, and they never ask them not to do it. They just, even so, if they have to have a real small playbook, they've got a real small playbook. If it's big and diverse, because their guys can handle it, it's big and diverse. And I asked him, I said, what would be your statement about this NFL draft? And the reason that I called him this was an NFL guy. Now you're going to know who it is, although I've never said it on air. I told you privately, who told me after Brian Lewerke's sophomore year, he thought Brian, with another good year, could go pro early. And I said, Brian doesn't get picked. There's several players that didn't get picked. I said, what would you say? And he said, there's too much film of Michigan State guys failing because the coaches didn't ask them to do what they could do. And he gave me a couple examples I want to run by you. He said, Brian Lewerke, he was injured. There were throws he could not make. And you knew he could not make them. And he goes, if you go back and watch the Ohio State game, there are games where those Ohio State corners, after a certain amount of yardage, backed off and almost let guys get behind him because they knew Lewerke couldn't make the throws. He said, they continued to ask him, so there were continued to be underthrown balls. He goes, listen, there are a lot of guys in the NFL making a ton of money who don't have huge arms, but they're never asked to make a throw they can't make. They talked about Cody White, they said in their opinion, he goes, I'm going to read my notes here. He goes, Darrell Stewart seems like a nice kid, but did you know after week 6 of the Spartan season, he already had 12 drops? 12 drops. These are not drops where guys were on him. These were drops where he was alone and the ball hit him in the hands and he dropped them. Cody White was their best wide receiver. But because Darrell Stewart went off against a terrible Western Michigan team, they just assumed he was the number one the whole rest of the year. While Cody White stayed static on Brian Lewerke's left side, a right-handed quarterback with an already injured arm, he did nothing till the second half of the season until somebody there was bright enough to say, gee, let's give him a shot on the right. I mean, again, they just kept talking about guys in bad positions. I'm sorry to take so much of your time, John, but I want your thoughts.
This is exactly what looked like was happening the last 2 years, and that to see it validated by the NFL at least confirms for some of us that we saw what we thought we were seeing. The statement that you made about consistently putting players in position to succeed is actually one that was around during the early part of the D'Antonio era when Don Treadwell was offensive coordinator, for example. It still blows my mind how this got so bad so fast the last 2 years. I think that the NFL draft speaks loudly to how much damage, temporary damage, short-term damage was done to the Michigan State brand of football I think it's going to be corrected pretty quickly, and I do like some of the undrafted free agents to go ahead and stick. I think they're going to make there's going to be some professional careers made there. But for anybody who wasn't sure how bad it was in the last couple of years and how far off track it got, you have just received the answer from the top level of the sport, and it's not pretty. And it is time to put it to bed for good, because I guarantee you it's not going to happen around here anymore for a long time to come. The game has changed. Mel Tucker is bringing in a higher level of proficiency than we've seen in the last couple of years.
John, I want to stick on this theme a little bit about Mel Tucker. He's got 7 commitments now, which is unbelievable considering he just got here in February and there's been no on-campus or off-campus recruiting pretty much his whole time here because of COVID. And he goes out and gets Hampton Fay. This is a big quarterback, 6'5", 220 with a huge arm. And most guys who have huge arms, look at Brett Favre, are not always the most accurate. He's extremely accurate. He runs the anchor leg on the 4, I don't even know what it is in track, but is it the 400 or whatever it is?
4x100? Yeah, something like that.
He runs the anchor leg of that. He runs a lot like Calvin Johnson, is how one NFL scout I know who lives in Texas told me about him. This is a kid that only played 3 games because of an injury, but this kid is a stud. I mean, he's an absolute stud. And when he went down injured, it didn't matter. Mel Tucker stayed right on him in recruiting. When he came to Michigan State, he stayed right on him, and the Spartans got him because of that. Your thoughts on Hampton Fay and just the way that Tucker's recruiting?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I actually like a big quarterback out of Texas. Sounds like Nick Foles for some of us that can remember. First thing. Second thing, adversity, dealing with injury. Sounds a little like Nick Foles. Sounds like Kirk Cousins. So I'd almost rather a guy have some of that under his belt before he get up to the big show, if you will, of major college football. Not everybody needs it. You're never rooting for somebody to have an injury, but dealing with some adversity I don't think is a bad thing. The agility that is coming to the quarterback position as far as what people can do with their feet, we all see it. You see Trevor Lawrence at the top of the sport doing it. You see Tua doing it as well. You're going to expect and need to see Spartan quarterbacks doing it here during these 2020s. My last thought on recruiting for Mel Tucker is, look at how many big dogs got picked this weekend from the University of Georgia. Look at the offensive linemen, the size of the Bulldogs that were taken. I think that is hopefully a preview of what you can expect from Michigan State offensive linemen later part of this decade after the Mel Tucker regime is fully established. So when you have a guy who understands the NFL game, understands the major college football game, that's a little bit of an edge. We've got a little more than we've had in the past. Not a knock on Mark D'Antonio. He just didn't work in the NFL. Mel Tucker did. I think you're already seeing the difference that can make very, very early in recruiting his first class.
I agree. And John, another thing I wanted to address with you, and I think it's a big one, is Mel Tucker goes out now. He's already got 7 kids for 21. So last week he hands out 40 offers, 12 for the class of 21, but 28 for the class of 22. He's already working ahead.
The game plan is set. It appears that this guy arrived to town and told the people at Michigan State before he agreed to come here, I got a game plan. I know what needs to be done. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Rather than playing golf or getting mixed up and distracted by the incredibly awful virus, it's a historic time. He's continuing to work on what he can, control what he can control, and he's trying to work his game plan. So what you hope to happen right now is that Michigan State football is moving up again. It's on the rise again, and is looking long-term to move past some of the programs in the Big Ten that they slipped behind in the last couple of years and be in position to compete in the Big Ten East as quickly as possible. And it may not take as long as we think. It's going to take some horses, but it may not take too long. It should not take nearly as long as the total rebuild that Mark D'Antonio had to do.
John, last question, but how big is it that Michigan State's had a player selected in the NFL draft 80 straight years? I think it's huge.
When you look at the major programs in major college football, there's no program that's had as many players drafted that's not a part of major college football. It's an incredibly important streak for Michigan State to keep going. because of the prominence and the importance of the NFL. The NFL is nothing like it was when the NFL draft began, but to be able to piggyback off of that many years of selection is so big, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say we probably don't have to worry about that in the next 2 or 3 years. But every single year, it's on your mind. You keep an eye on it. You worry. You wonder. And then there's some relief when it happens. It's a fantastic streak and something Spartan football should be proud about, really connecting the program from the start of the draft all the way through to the future. Drafts that haven't even happened yet.
He is the great John Schaub, Spartan Nation senior writer with the State of Michigan State Football.